everyone, my name is Sumit. I'm a digital chess coach. Now we'll see the special move called en passant. So en passant is a special move. It is to capture the enemy pawn with your own pawn, but it's a special capture. But if I explain to you now, you will not understand in depth. So watch the video until the end to understand what is en passant. This is a move which a lot of beginners get confused. So watch until the end to understand what is en passant. And if you have
In this lecture, we are going to see the special move by the pawn, the special capture move by the pawn called the en passant. This is a French word, and it is the meaning of en passant is in passing. So in passing, you can capture the pawn. So this is a special move. This is a move which a lot of beginners have a problem with. They are confused with en passant. So you pay attention to my lecture, and I will explain it to you what is en passant. So let us see the PDF file. So beginner players find it difficult to grasp the rule of the en passant pawn capture. This is because of the very nature of the pawn move. Unlike all other chessmen, it moves and captures in a very different way. The word en passant means in passing. So rules of en passant capture is like this: a pawn attacking a square crossed by opponent's pawn. So you have a pawn on d5 and white pawn is on e5. The black pawn is on d7 and white pawn is on c5. And if black plays d5, so white can capture this pawn of d5 by crossing it on to d6. And this is called the en passant pawn capture. If the pawn on d7 moves to d5, white to move, and it is white to move, the right to capture the black pawn on white has a right to capture the black pawn on d5 with its c5 pawn. So to do this, white removes the black pawn on d5 from the board and places his c5 pawn on d6. So if you play d5, you can cut this pawn and place it on d6, and the capture is recorded as e into d6 ep, which is the short form of en passant. So I'll show you in the diagram. So you have a black has a pawn here, white has a pawn on c5, and king here and here, and if black plays d5, bypassing this square, the capture square of the pawn, then white can do the en passant pawn capture like this. I'll show you one more time. The en passant pawn capture is made like this: d5 e into d6 is en passant pawn capture. So this is just a one-time pawn capture. You lose the right. If you don't capture it immediately in the next move, you lose the right to capture it. You cannot capture it in the future. But if you have, it should be adjacent squares. If you have a pawn here here at e7 and you play e5, you cannot capture. This is not possible. It should be in the adjacent squares. So if you have a pawn on e5 and pawn on f7 and d7, if black plays f5 and white decide not to take it and play something else, say for example king f2, and again black plays something like d5. Now even if you don't have not done en passant pawn capture, here he can actually do it for this pawn. So but you can only do it once once in the game, because now the pawn is on d6 and there is no en passant anymore in this position, because there is no way even if you have a pawn here, you cannot cross it. So if you imagine if you have a pawn on c7, so you can capture this pawn on d6, but if you play something like, if black plays something like c5, again this en passant is not possible. It is not possible at all. So that is just a one-time capture, and the rules are like this. The rules of en passant is So similarly from the black's point of view also, uh, in this position, black's point of view, if the pawn moves from g2 to g4, black has the right to capture white pawn on g4 with his f pawn. Black removes the white pawn on g4 from the board and plays it with his f4 pawn on g3. This capture is recorded as f into g3 en passant. In both diagrams, white do not play e into d6 en passant or f into g3 en passant. They lose their right to capture this pawn. The option to capture the pawn en passant must be exercised by the capturing side immediately on the move after the pawn is advanced in this pawn um, or two squares in one move. The rule does not allow the capture to be postponed until later in the game. So the rules of pawn capture is possibly only if the following conditions are satisfied. If white side has to make the en passant pawn capture, the pawn doing the capture must be on the 5th rank. The pawn doing the capture here again, it is on the 5th rank, right? So the white pawn is on the 5th rank, and the pawn doing the capture must be on the 5th rank. The pawn doing the capturing, the pawn being captured must be on the adjacent files like this. These are the adjacent files. The pawn to be captured must be advanced 2 squares in one move from its original square. So the first move of black's this pawn. Otherwise, the en passant is not possible. In reply, the opposite pawn captures the pawn that is advanced 2 squares in one move as if it is advanced only 1 square. So it is advanced 1 square, it will capture like this, right? So in the same way the capture should be. Even if it moves 2 squares, you can capture like this. The option to capture en passant must be exercised by the capturing side on its very first move following such 2 square advance of the opponent's pawn. The rule does not allow the capture to be postponed until later in the game. If the player chooses not to capture en passant, he loses the option for that particular pawn. So the en passant pawn capture is an optional move and not a compulsory move. So that is about the en passant pawn capture. This is a little bit of a tricky move. So I urge you to go through this video multiple times, and also the PDF resource which I will be giving in the link.